Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Sunday Messages. And I am titling this episode Dom, but really this is going to encompass several different dimensions. I'm going to talk a bit about shadow work today. I am going to talk about the class Dom a little bit. I'm going to talk about power. I'm going to talk about energetics. I'm going to talk about just a few different threads that I want to follow today. And I also feel called to weave in some themes and elements that were really alive during my childhood, and also some of the things that I was taught really early in my intuitive development, in my intuitive training, and in really learning about energetics when I was a late teenager. And how much my perspective has shifted into encompassing more themes and energetics of personal power, because there are some energetic principles that some people teach that can be really disempowering. So I'm tackling this from several different angles, so I hope you enjoy this today. And some of you may know that I'm hosting a class called Dom. This is something that I've actually wanted to teach for a long time, because all too often do we engage with things from a place of disempowerment rather than personal power, rather than being empowered, rather than being the creator that you're here to be. So my entire intention in creating Dom was really from the standpoint of, I want people to feel their power again. I want them to know where it lives in their body. I want them to know what they can do if they drop it or if they lose it one day and they feel like they can't conjure it up again. I want them to know how to think about it, how to tell stories about it in their mind, how to have the mental focus and clarity in order to sharpen up their personal power. I want them to know how to work with their aura, with their whole energetic field in order to get things to move in their favor. And this is something that I just feel beyond inspired to offer people, because I grew up in a state and I grew up being powerless. Like I grew up with addicts and people with extreme personality disorders and being abused by a lot of people. And when you're a child, you really are in the depths of powerlessness. And my God, has that made me a beast in my adult life. I have done a 180, because when you spend enough time being powerless, you will eventually flip. And when I got into my teenage years, then it became, as soon as I had enough skills to make money, that was really the first place that I could grab onto some threads of power, was being able to work, whether that was babysitting or hustling or recycling. I mean, I was obsessed with making money when I was young, because for me, it was a form of power. It was a way for me to get food in my belly when adults around me wouldn't do it. So for me, this is not a concept. This isn't just something that you read in a book. This is something that you embody, that you practice, that you learn. It's a skill that needs to be sharpened and refined. And I think that now more than ever is the time where people need to start activating their personal power more and more and more. Because everything in the world, the institutions, the systems, the bullshit that we've got going on, is putting people in a position where they're dropping their power, they're forgetting it, and then automatically handing over their power to circumstance. And this is not the time for people who do have a lot of energetic awareness to just be sitting on the sidelines. To me, this time in history is about refinement. This is about clarity. This is about sharpening skills. This is about cleaning up the mind. And there are so many fine details when it comes to power and disempowerment that we need to start learning how to navigate so that we can support our creations and what we choose to engage with in the world and what we give birth to more of. The more power you hold, the more power you wield, and the more you see yourself as powerful, the more control you have over circumstance. This is where I think my perspective does become controversial, because people say, well, you can't control circumstance. I disagree. I say the circumstances will bend to me. I am in charge. I am in charge of what I call out of the quantum field. Now, there might be some debris that I have to take care of, and I call it energetic debris, as in something that I'm conscious of, not being desirable, but still might be alive in my energetic field, so it presents itself to me because it hasn't fully been cleaned up yet. So this is why the tagline of Dom is "The world submits to you," because it does. And we've forgotten this art. And I really want to bring this back, because this is not the time to cower and start giving power to any old person. This is something that we want to conjure up internally and master. The more you master your power, the better off you are going to be. And the more things will start to shift and bend for you. And they will get into alignment with you. You will find things that are exactly congruent with the level of power that you hold within yourself. So this is why what a lot of us are taught, and what I was taught very early on in my energetic training and in my intuitive development, was the idea of free will. And in the big picture, yes, free will exists, but it does not make the full picture. It does not fully encompass what's going on with the energetics. Because while people have free will, there's a difference between people having autonomy over the actions that they take and the version of them that you are interacting with. I'm going to give an example that is kind of extreme, but it perfectly demonstrates what I'm talking about. So let's say you know that there is a woman, and see this as being outside of yourself, okay? So we're going to be in observer mode as I'm describing this. Let's say you see a woman who is in an abusive relationship. So she is being emotionally abused, physically abused. She is receiving this abuse. There is an energetic signature to that. There is something happening in the intersection of her energetic field and her partner's energetic field that is resulting in the experience of abuse, right? There's a dynamic in that. Yet, this same person who is abusing this woman, if this person goes and interacts with a whole bunch of other people, the abuse dynamic isn't necessarily going to be there. The abuse energetics are not necessarily going to be present, which is why a lot of the time when it comes to abuse, you see such a stark discrepancy between a woman saying she's being harmed and abused and there's all of these things going on at home, and then other people who are like, what are you talking about? Quote unquote, he's a great guy, or whatever the stereotypical phrases might be in that situation. The answer is that the other people are not receptive, energetically available, or in alignment with being abused. So if you have people who are completely oblivious to this and it's not coming to life in their experience with this abuser, it's because of their own energetic availability. The same would go for if there's just any old person, like let's say a cashier or a waitress or any old service worker, and that service worker is energetically available. They're circulating a current of being victimized and being abused, right? Because this is why it's so sticky, is because it's an energetic current that's circulating. As soon as that abuser comes into contact with that person who's available for it, right, then all of a sudden it will activate and cause the abusive nature to come up and out. I want to be clear, as I'm talking about this, I am not placing blame. I'm explaining the energetic dynamics of why these things get so sticky and why they can be extraordinarily difficult to correct. This is also what explains why particularly women who have been in an abusive relationship, not done the healing, will seek out unconsciously. They will, because they're still in energetic alignment with being abused, right? The being victimized, being harmed, having so much energetic availability for that it creates a cavity where the abuser actually fills all of that in. It becomes a perfect match for the victim. So this is why there is a perpetual abuse cycle for so many people. And when these energetic dynamics, whether you be the abuser, the assailant, right? If you're holding a lot of that shadow and you grew up in that shadow and you're blind to that shadow and you don't have full consciousness or awareness around that shadow, you're going to continue to abuse. If you don't get a lot of support around it, or if you can't match it with a lot of consciousness and get that shadow to dissolve, then it's something you're going to continue to do to people. You're going to find victims and you're going to carry that out again and again and again and again until it shifts. And the same goes for if you are receiving a lot of abuse and there's no energetic, mental, emotional correction that happens. You're going to receive abuser after abuser after abuser after abuser. This is not rocket science. It is very clear energetics. So I know that this is a very touchy and sensitive subject for a lot of people, but it is so crisp and clear. It presents the energetics perfectly. And you see patterns not by chance. None of this is a coincidence, and none of this is bad luck. This is not something where it's like, oh, what are the odds of you getting another abusive partner? No, this is a matter of not doing the healing, the energetic, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual work and refinement in order to remove these patterns and fragments of being abused. And until that piece is done, you're going to get the same thing that's alive in your field, and you're going to activate it again and again and again. And this is the importance of personal power, is that the power that you hold, and the more you learn how to wield this within yourself, you actually determine what aspects of other people present themselves to you. Like I explained at the beginning of this example, when you have all of these people who are like, how is he an abuser? That's so confusing. I can't believe that's actually happening. That's just an energetic experience that one person is having because of their unavailability for abuse. And if you're unavailable for that, you're not going to see it. It will not come into your space, even if you're sitting next to someone who's abusing their wife. It's just not going to wake up in your energetic field. And this is the importance of this work. Because no matter what pattern or story or experience is still alive for you, you have power to manipulate this, to rearrange these pieces and activate new aspects of people so that when your fields intersect, because that's really what we're talking about here, when your energetic field intersects with another person's energetic field, what is conjured up? Like, what comes out of it? What's the experience between the two of you? This is energetic relational dynamics. So when someone is having me, like if I'm doing a cold psychic reading for two people, what I'm really looking at is, okay, what's happening when these two bubbles come into contact with each other? What's happening in that space when they're in the same physical space together, or when they're in a conversation, when they're communicating? What's going on? And that is going to determine what the experiences of the individual. When you're dealing with unconscious people, everyone thinks they're right. You know, even an abuser is going to say, You made me do it, or you pushed me too far, or I warned you about that. An abuser is going to make any case to be in the right. A narcissist is always going to posture as being the victim. That's just the way they operate. And so, of course, that's going to be the case with unconscious people. But if you are bringing your awareness and your consciousness to the energy that you're circulating, and you are really making this a practice, something that you are in control of, then you are going to start to see people's behavior and attitudes adjust accordingly. So this isn't a matter of you getting in their energetic field and tinkering with things or being manipulative. No. This has to do with what you are activating simply by being so heavily calibrated to what you desire that there is no choice but for people to show up with that energy that you're holding. This is what I'm teaching in Dom. This is where the concept of free will splinters off for me. Is that, there's free will to a point. There's free will, and then there is active creation with what you are calling out of others, good, bad, and ugly. And the more you have control over this, the more that you will see people adjust. It is going to change relationship dynamics. It's going to change how people respond to you. It's going to change how people show up for you. It's going to change the energy that they present to you. So if you are finding yourself telling yourself stories like, that's just how I'm treated, or that's just how this is, or that's just how people are, or this group is this way and that group is another way, if you're telling a lot of stories about your interpersonal relationships or how you're treated and it's not serving you, this is a power issue. Learning how to calibrate your energy and actually control what it is that you're radiating in terms of your energetic field, your power, your storytelling, your expectations. If you do not have a strong grip on these pieces, then you are simply going to be receiving whatever is the default mode that your system is programmed to. So what I mean by default programs is like what you learned in childhood, what were your adaptations when you were growing up, or traumas of the past, what happened, the betrayals and all of the data that you've been collecting for a long time. You're going to add all of that up, and your system is going to calibrate to the traumas and tragedies rather than your desires and expectations. And this is one of the biggest things that I'm seeing missing in the world, because people keep beating the drum and driving the narrative of people are this way. If they're just not good to you, ditch them. If they're not treating you perfectly, then forget about it. That's not how this works. If you don't solve this, you're going to drag yourself around, and then you're going to recreate the same relational dynamics again and again and again until you take a hint that you're the common denominator. You have to accept that you are the common denominator in all things. You are the Dom of your energy, and you do control how things turn out. If people don't like that either. People don't like taking radical responsibility for outcomes. But that is really, if you are wanting to create in this life, you've got to accept that piece. You have to say, okay, I am determining this outcome by what I'm holding in my body, by what I'm calibrating to, by what I'm saying and doing and thinking and how I'm being and how I'm holding myself. These are key components to what you receive from the world. And the more that you identify as being powerful and you embody that, then you can start to move it in any direction that you want, because power is the foundation. If you can access that, then everything else becomes easily available, because you're not coming from this place of creating by default, I've always been a victim. I'm always going to be a victim. This is just how it is. This is just how people are. People treat me like shit. That is just never going to help you. Now, of course, I believe that we all have some underlying patterns or stories, and we can match that with thoughts that perpetuate them. I still have them sometimes. It's not like I'm exempt from this or that I don't have these human experiences. The point is not that you shouldn't have these patterns and stories. No. When it comes to this energetic work and this energetic process, what I can tell you is that there is always going to be more things that you want to experience in circumstantial adjustments, relational dynamics. There's always going to be things that you want to tweak and that you want to receive more of, that you need to calibrate to. And so this is lifelong work. This is not something where it's one and done. You're going to want more or less of things from everybody over time. And so the more that you make this a practice, the more you're going to have control over all of these fine details. So when you get good enough at this, you're not going to be stepping over big hurdles. It's something where it's just going to be these small refinements. Like, think about being in a relationship, and if you are really in your power, you are just in your absolute certainty that things are bending to you. You expect and see only the best of the best from your partner. They treat you like gold. It's an amazing dynamic. The chemistry is on point. And at a certain point, like, let's say you want more affection or more time to yourself or more solo trips or whatever, it will be just the slightest tweak that you can make where that will start to present itself to you. With more mastery of this comes greater speed. In the beginning, for very deep, long-standing patterns, unsurprisingly, if the groove in your brain is really deep around this one concept or this one story, that's going to take a minute. It's going to take practice. It's going to take a lot of consciousness and intentionality to shift it. And so the more you do this on a regular basis, the faster you will get. And when you're at full mastery of this, then it's light speed. Then it's something where it can manifest in an instant. There is no time gap in between what it is that you're doing. And that's really, really fun stuff when you can see it happen in real time. When you're not waiting for data and wrestling with your ego again and again and again. And this is why I feel so strongly about this work. I personally feel that we need more empowered creators than ever. I really think that we need people to be activated in their creation. What I find for most people is that they've adapted to power in different ways. So from your childhood, when there were different positions where you felt powerless, because that's where it starts, like when you really are creating through your parents, essentially, it's where all of your programming comes from, where you learn about the plane of duality. There's a lot that you learn in childhood, but powerlessness, at some point in your childhood, you were powerless. You had that experience. Depending on a lot of different factors, you adapted to that sensation of powerlessness in one of many ways. I don't think I can necessarily list them all out, but I'm sure you can think about, some people adapt by lying. The way that they have power is through secrecy, through hiding everything, through deception, and simply trying to fly under the radar at all times. Some people freeze and shut down and just comply to whatever is happening around them. Some people lash out and rebel and become contrarian just for the sake of it, like a rebel without a cause. For myself, I adapted to my powerlessness by being a bully. The best way that I was able to deal with my parents was by inflicting harm. It's like, I'm not showing you any mercy. I don't owe you people anything. I'm going to do whatever I want. As a matter of fact, I should have been worse to you. My adaptation really kept me in a state of cruelty for a very long time. That was the only way that I was able to cope with the abuse. And so, of course, this is a detriment when you get into adulthood. It becomes very isolating. You hurt a lot of people. It actually doesn't serve, and it isn't the path of least resistance, and it doesn't result in the quality of relationships that I ultimately desired. And so then that led to me having to carve out and soften aspects of myself so that it did result in the quality of relationships that I wanted to have. So for many years, it has been a very long process of making tweaks within myself that result in what I desire, because that's really what is needed. But when you are practiced enough, it becomes a situation where the old adaptations aren't needed because you stop manifesting situations where they become necessary to bust out. You know, if your adaptation is to collapse, cower, back away, submit, comply with whatever is happening, if that is what you lean into over many, many years, holding that much resentment and frustration and, self-neglect and self-abandonment, these are the types of things that will make you sick. I am not joking when I say that. The same goes for stress. If I were like a rageaholic and I was cutting people out of my life left and right, and I was being awful to everyone, and I was holding cruelty and nastiness, I would probably give myself a heart attack at some point if you're holding that much stress. So these things that come from our disempowerment stories and the adaptations that ensue really do have a massive impact. And then we can sometimes get lost in thinking that we are a victim to these things if we don't get in touch with our power. If we aren't plugged into our power, then we will start believing that this is just the way of the world. And that can be very, very cold and dark if we get into that headspace. No matter the adaptation that you have and that you've adjusted to over this life, it stems from a feeling of powerlessness and being disconnected from power. The reason why I was cruel is because I didn't have any tools. I didn't have internal power structures to where I felt like I was in control of what I was receiving from other people. And so the only way that I knew how to deal with it was by being mean, was by being rude to people, by dominating people, by bossing people around and being so overtly aggressive that I would frighten people. And so that is all from feeling out of control and feeling powerless. That's not true power. The fact that I had to do that in order for me to feel safe, I obviously was not in my power. And the same goes for all the rest. If you're compulsively lying, you're probably not feeling in control or in your power. You're definitely not plugged in. You're definitely not taking guidance from your higher self. You're acting out of fear, disempowerment, survival. And so a lot of this is just hooked into these really primal young wounds that we have in order to keep ourselves safe. And this is also why power can be particularly destructive, because the more primal, the more barbaric these things can be and the more insidious they can be. This is why power gets such a bad rap, because when we think of power, we think of attempts to control the masses or trying to overpower people through force. And that's not, that you're in a survival paradigm. You're trying to survive, you're in fear, you're out of control if you're trying to do all of those things. So there's a lot of misunderstanding that happens around the discussion and the understanding of power. because so many people have poisoned it. They see it as using force. And real power is done with energetics and posture and embodiment and breath and practice. Power comes from an internal source. It does not come from acting out towards others, nor does it come from collapsing and crawling into a dark hole and hiding. That also will unplug you from your power. So obviously there's a lot to this. We've got mindset, energetics, embodiment, personal narrative. There's a lot happening. So in the short term, what I will say, for those of you who are not in Dom, because it's like, of course, the bulk of the tools, the lecture, the embodiment practices, understanding the energetics, understanding calibration, whether you're calibrating up or down, what you're calibrating to, all of that stuff is going to be happening inside the container. What I will say for those of you who do not feel called to the container, but you are still wanting to access more power, is you need to either find people who empower you and plug into that continually and make sure that you're accessing things that more often make you feel powerful and connected to yourself. And of course, you are not going to be surprised when I say this, you need to meditate. Empty the mind, get into a state where you can feel your connection to God, universe, divine source. Because when you're plugged into that, when you're really, really, really in alignment with that part of you, you are going to feel your power again. It's going to start waking it up. So those are the two simple things that you can do. And of course, like the consumption thing is big because a lot of the time people's energy gets scattered all over the place just because of the overwhelming places that it can go. And so you want to be more intentional with that, as well as continuing to connect to something that's larger than yourself. A higher power of some sort is going to help start to develop these tracks that will be supportive for you. Now, when it comes to Dom, the container, the way that I really wanted to work with this is one, lecture based. So there's a piece of this where I have to explain what's happening in the energetics. So if you liked the conversation that we had in this podcast, get in that container because you are going to love the transmission on Sunday. You are going to freaking love it because it's like this, but in depth, and you can ask me questions. So we're going very, very deep on the energetic side of this. And I'm going to explain it to you likely through visuals. So you're going to be able to understand how it looks, what's happening. The other piece is it's going to be energetic work. So you're going to be able to feel it because we're going to do different energetic exercises to help you feel your power and tap into it and understand where it's living, when it's growing, when it's contracting, and just in general, what is happening to it. Then we are also going to just stay on top of the practical pieces. So the application in everyday life, what is happening, what's going on there, and what you can do in order to maintain your power better, even if you're not fully masterful at this yet. Because there is somewhat of an interim where you're not going to be, creating on demand, second by second by second, intentionally, because that comes with time. The rapid creation is something that has to be practiced for you to get faster at it, for the speed to come. But of course, there are practical things that you can do to keep your power intact while you're developing this skill. So we're going to bring all of these things together, and it's going to be partly doing the energetic work, I don't want to say from a fully meditative state, but from an energetic place. So it's going to be highly interactive when you are, working with me, or even if you're watching the replay. There's going to be different exercises that you're doing in order to fully feel this, so that when you are walking in daily life, you can actually feel the dynamics more, because you're going to be more tuned into what's happening internally. And then I'm also going to help guide you through what I call a disempowerment trigger, like when you're back in that powerlessness victim state, how you can really ease your system back into feeling power, back into getting into creation mode. Of course, because I'm teaching this, anytime you teach something, you need to be prepared to do shadow work around it. And so that is what I've been wrestling with all week, is doing a shit ton of shadow work on this. And it has just solidified and integrated more and more information for the transmission on Sunday. So I'm living it, I'm doing it, I'm breathing it right now, and then I'm going to deliver it to you on Sunday. So this is not something that is just mental or conceptual. It's also going to be a lot of body-based stuff as well. The one thing that I am absolutely certain of everyone who walks through this container, is power will no longer be a mystery. If it's something that confuses you, or that you're like, how do they do that? Or how does everything work out for them? Or why are they treated differently than me? All of that stuff will be completely demystified. You're going to feel like you have absolutely plenty of tools in your kit in order to work with the power elements within yourself. So we are going to have a ton of fun on Sunday. It is the 29th at 2 p.m. Pacific time. And it is $222 to get in. And of course, you get the transmission on Sunday. And then we're also going to be doing a Q&A sometime in earlier mid-September. I'll be scheduling that later once people have a little bit of time to practice it, feel it out, take it out into the real world. And then if there's anything that you want help with, or you want my specific insight on that is specific to you and your circumstances and situation, I will absolutely be available to help you with that directly in the Q&A. So if you want to get in, I would absolutely join. Of course, you get replays of everything if you get in. But after I go live on Sunday, I will be increasing the price. So if you get in now, you are getting the early bird price. So I just wanted to throw that out there for each and every one of you. I am so excited to see each and every one of you in there. It is going to be a blast, and you're going to have a lot of fun and learn a whole hell of a lot. So I'm excited to deliver this to you, and that's a wrap. I will see you all so soon. If you want the link, it is onyxhealing.com/dom, D-O-M, or you can go to the show notes or the description box, and everything you could possibly want is down there in the description. All right, my friends, that's all that I have for you today. Thank you so much, and I will talk to you later. Have a good one, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.